Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking what might honestly look like a super dense, highly technical academic text on dairy technology, and we're going to transform it into an incredible journey. We're unraveling the 8,000-year-old history, the massive global economics, and the totally surprising microscopic science behind one of humanity's absolute favorite foods, cheese. It's a wild ride that starts out in the scorching desert and ends up in massive, highly mechanized modern factories. Let's get into it.
Section 1. An 8,000-year-old accident.
So, to really grasp the science of cheese, we actually need to step out of the shiny modern laboratory and go way, way back in time. I want you to picture the Fertile Crescent, roughly 8,000 years ago. You've got these nomadic tribes traveling really long distances in a super warm climate. Now, they needed a convenient way to store surplus milk, so they used what they had, which happened to be animal skin bags, usually made from the stomachs of ruminant animals. Okay, I know, that sounds kind of gross right off the bat, but the reality of this is absolutely fascinating. You've got fresh milk sitting in a pouch that just naturally contains digestive enzymes, like rennin. Then you add the intense heat of the desert, which ferments the milk sugars, plus the constant rocking and swaying of the animals walking, which physically breaks up the liquid inside. And what happens? Well, you accidentally create the very first curds and whey. These nomads pretty quickly figured out that the liquid whey was a great refreshing drink, while the solid curds, especially when preserved with a handful of salt, were this incredible source of high protein that could actually survive the long journey.
From that brilliant accidental discovery, cheese evolved right alongside human civilization. By 2,500 years ago, it wasn't just a survival food anymore. It had become a prominent gourmet staple of the Greek and Roman diets. Fast forward to the 18th century, and we see a massive shift. What was once purely a farmhouse tradition, an art handed down through generations, began to incorporate actual scientific guidelines. Cheesemaking officially became an art with science. And that exact trajectory brings us directly to the modern day, where we've transitioned completely from those small farmhouses to total mechanization.
The contrast is absolutely wild when you think about it. We've gone from a nomadic traveler sloshing milk around in an animal skin to a reality where mechanization and automation have reached such incredibly high levels that several tons of cheese can be produced without a single human hand ever touching it. We're talking about advanced continuous cheddaring machines, automated cutting and cooking vats, and these massive pressing machines that just handle unbelievable volumes all day long.
Which brings us to Section 2, the global cheese economy.
To support all that crazy automation, these factories have to be huge, because the global demand is just staggering. Worldwide, we are producing over 17 million tons of cheese every single year. When you look at the real heavy hitters, the United States is leading the pack by a massive margin, churning out over 5 million tons annually. Just to put that into perspective for you, the U.S. literally uses about 1/3 of its total annual milk production just to manufacture cheese. Germany and France are right behind them, making up that incredible European demand.
But how are we actually eating all of this? Well, when we break down the global consumption of cheese as an ingredient, there's one undisputed king of the dairy market, and it's pizza. Taking up a whopping 26% of total cheese usage, pizza alone drives a massive sector of the global dairy economy. Snack foods and frozen entrees also rely heavily on specific types of manufactured cheeses that are engineered to melt and blend perfectly.
But here's the thing. The market isn't static. It's actively shifting right under our feet. In mature Western markets, we're seeing a fast-aging population that simply consumes fewer calories and less cheese per capita than younger generations. At the same time, health trends are forcing the whole industry to adapt, driving massive demand for low-fat, low-salt, and lactose-free options. So, while growth in Europe and the US might be slowing down, or at least pivoting towards specialized local and organic cheeses, the real explosion in demand is happening in emerging markets like Asia and Latin America, where rising incomes are totally transforming daily diets.
Let's zoom in on one specific example in Section 3, the Indian market boom. The growth of cheese in India is basically a perfect storm of three distinct steps. First, you have a major health-conscious shift. As concerns about obesity and cardiovascular health rise, people are actively avoiding traditional high-fat butter on their morning bread. Second, the massive introduction and exploding popularity of pizza has created this sudden, immense demand for mozzarella. And third, processed cheese slices have stepped right in as the new favorite bread mate. When you add all this up in a population of over 1 billion people, economists project a potential domestic demand of 50,000 tons. It's a real game changer.
All right, moving on to Section 4, defining the perfect curd.
So,
We understand the history, and we've got a handle on the economics. But with over 2,000 named varieties of cheese out there, how do we actually define what cheese is scientifically? What's really brilliant here is the simplicity of it. The academic definition tells us that cheese is basically milk that has been coagulated, meaning it's turned into a gel-like solid, by an enzyme like rennet, and then separated from the liquid moisture, which is the whey. Think about what's sitting in your fridge right now. Whether it's a string cheese or a fancy wheel of brie, it all comes down to manipulating those basic steps: how you curdle the milk and how much moisture you leave behind.
Now, the very first major fork in the road for any cheese is whether it's going to be ripened or unripened. Unripened cheese, like the fresh cottage cheese you might have for breakfast, is ready to eat immediately after it's made. It's high in moisture and very delicate. Ripened cheese, on the other hand, is held in controlled temperatures and humidity for months, sometimes even years. During this time, bacteria and natural enzymes cause complex biochemical and physical changes. This is exactly what creates that deep, sharp bite of an aged cheddar.
Section 5. Classifying 2,000 varieties.
So when you start playing around with ripening times, fat content, and moisture, you get those roughly 2,000 named varieties of cheese we talked about. To organize all this delicious chaos, food scientists and legal standards rely on a very specific matrix. Let's walk through it. The defining characteristics that legally separate cheeses are their maximum moisture and their minimum milk fat content. A hard-pressed cheese, like the Parmesan you'd grate over a bowl of pasta, has very little moisture, under 39% maximum, making it firm, brittle, and intensely flavorful. Compare that to a soft cheese at the bottom of the scale, which can be up to 80% moisture. This sliding scale of water and fat is literally the scientific blueprint for every single cheese on Earth.
And manipulating just those few variables results in sheer visual and flavorful magic. By tweaking the moisture, adjusting the milk fat, and letting different bacteria or molds go to work during the ripening phase, you get this incredible, vibrant spectrum of textures, colors, and flavors.
Which brings us to our final act, Section 6, the nutritional payoff.
So why does all this science and history actually matter to your daily health? Why has humanity spent 8,000 years obsessing over and perfecting this food? The absolute crucial point is this number right here, near 0. That is the amount of lactose found in most aged cheeses. Because the main carbohydrate in milk is lactose, you might naturally assume cheese is bad news for lactose-intolerant individuals. But actually, during the cheese-making process, almost all the lactose is lost when that liquid whey is drained away. And any trace amounts left over, they're quickly hydrolyzed or broken down by the starter bacteria during the ripening phase, so cheese is actually incredibly safe for lactose-intolerant people.
Beyond just lacking lactose, cheese is a highly concentrated package of all the essential nutrients inherited from milk. Because you are removing the water, you are left with a dense block of casein protein, calcium, and vital minerals. Relative to its energy level, is an absolute nutritional powerhouse, which makes total sense out of why those nomadic tribes valued it so highly for their survival. We've definitely come a long way from a sun-baked animal skin bag in the desert. Today, modern technology allows us to create perfectly uniform, highly mechanized, low-fat and low-salt cheeses that address the specific health needs of billions of people. But, it leaves us with a really fascinating thought to ponder. As we engineer every single variable of the curd in a lab, are we perfecting this 8,000-year-old art? Or are we slowly losing the unpredictable magic of that original, brilliant accident? Definitely something to think about the next time you open your fridge. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.